Born into shadows, unloved and unwanted, Maria Callas began life as an instrument of her mother's unrelenting ambition, a child molded by rejection, hardened by cruelty. In the chaos of a war-torn Greece, she sang to survive, her voice rising above the despair of hunger, humiliation, and danger. A voice so transcendent, so pure, it could silence even the horrors of war, and yet the world's adoration was as fleeting as its applause. Branded a traitor, betrayed by those who once cheered her name, she was a woman tempered by tragedy, her every triumph forged in fire. But from these ashes rose a phoenix, a force of nature whose voice shattered barriers, silenced rivals, and stirred the soul. For every soaring note that brought nations to their knees, there was a heartbreak that left her hollow. For every rapturous ovation, a betrayal that deepened her solitude. Her beauty was mocked, her talent envied, and her love, given so freely, repaid with cruelty. Yet she transformed agony into art, her heartbreak into legend, her pain into a sound that the world could neither forget nor replace. She loved with the intensity of her arias, fierce, fervent, and fatal. Onassis, the billionaire who possessed her heart, left it shattered, trading her devotion for the empty glitter of a dynasty. The tenor who mirrored her fire brought passion, but no peace. Her romances were epics, grand, glorious, and devastating, leaving her to endure a loneliness as vast as her fame. Even the stage, her sanctuary and torment, turned against her, as illness, despair, and betrayal stole the gift that had once made her immortal. What remains of a woman whose life was an aria, exquisite, excruciating, and impossible to sustain? When the ovations fade, when the spotlight dims, and when the world demands more than a heart can give, how does a goddess survive in silence? This is not just the story of a voice, it is the saga of a soul, betrayed, broken, and reborn. It is a tale of love and loss, triumph and torment, beauty and brutality. The story of Maria Callas, a woman who gave everything to a world that took even more. A life lived like an opera, magnificent, merciless, and tragic. If you like stories like this, please consider subscribing or supporting us on the channel. Every like, share, and comment helps push this further out into the algorithm, allowing us to share these remarkable stories of women with more people. And now, let's get into the scandalous secrets of Maria Callas. Maria Callas's story does not begin with her birth, but with a mournful overture steeped in sorrow. "I've had to help myself," she would later say, a refrain that lingers like the echo of a tragic aria. Her arrival was not a joyous occasion, but a fragile act of defiance, born from her mother Litsa's desperation to fill the void left by her son, who died tragically at just 2 years old in the sweltering summer of 1922. Whether typhoid or meningitis claimed him is uncertain, but his loss marked Litsa forever. Convinced by an astrologer that her next child would be her son reborn, she carried Maria not as a daughter, but as a hope that her lost boy would return. Above George's pharmacy in the Greek town of Meneghini, the household simmered with quiet resentment and barely restrained tension. Litsa, who styled herself as the daughter of a Greek general, bristled against what she saw as the mediocrity of her life. "My father was a general, and I married a pharmacist," she would say mockingly. When George sold the pharmacy and announced plans to emigrate, she accused him of cowardice, insisting that he was fleeing scandal. An affair with the mayor's daughter, she claimed. Yet, on August 2nd, 1923, they boarded a ship to America, and the skies over New York greeted them with flags at half-mast for President Warren G. Harding's death. To Litsa, the sight was an ill omen, causing her to weep. In the cramped apartments of Astoria, Queens, George shortened the family name to Callas and their elder daughters to Jackie. Their surroundings were stark, peeling walls, dim corridors, and the unceasing clatter of tenement life. Maria entered this fractured world on December 3rd, 1923, at Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital. From the moment Litsa saw her dark hair and olive skin, she turned away in disappointment and refused to look at Maria for 4 days. She had hoped for a golden-haired, blue-eyed son, not a daughter who reminded her of everything she longed to escape. "It is a cruel thing to make a child feel unwanted," Maria would later say, and her mother's rejection shaped her earliest memories. George worked tirelessly, juggling jobs as a Greek teacher, a salesman, and a pharmacy assistant, but his efforts could not hold the family together. 9 moves in 8 years marked their descent into poverty, each relocation a silent admission of failure. Liza, restless and volatile, swung between moments of manic creativity, imaginary banquets and impromptu dances, and fits of cruel discipline, her punishments as unpredictable as they were inventive. A sharp slap, a smear of pepper on the lips, tossing the children's things into the hallway for an unmade bed, and several times beating them with an umbrella. The family fractures deepened. George retreated into silence, burdened by his failures and distracted by a string of affairs. Liza spiraled further, her volatility culminating one desperate night when she swallowed poison. Maria and Jackie found her vomiting on the floor, and for 2 months, Liza was confined to Bellevue Hospital. George dismissed her anguish with cruel indifference, muttering, "That crazy woman." Maria, perceptive beyond her years, believed her mother suffered from schizophrenia, while Jackie later admitted that by the age of 10, she had already contemplated taking her own life. Maria and Jackie were not allowed to play with the neighborhood children, as Liza viewed herself as an aristocrat, and all the neighbors were simply beneath her. And yet, amid the chaos, Maria found glimmers of light. She adored her father, despite his many failings. "I was always his favorite," she would later say, clinging to the fragile bond they shared. But Liza's favoritism for Jackie, beautiful, capable Jackie, left Maria to wrestle with her insecurities. Her dark hair, her acne, her weight, and her glasses all became targets of her mother's sharp tongue. Only in song did Maria find sanctuary. Her voice, raw and untrained, became her refuge. The first opera Maria ever heard was Tosca, after her mother took some records from the library, a moment that struck her with the force of destiny. She began to teach herself arias, mimicking the trills of her canaries, filling their cramped apartment with soaring, unpolished brilliance. Sensing an opportunity, Liza entered Maria into local contests, where her voice drew admiration, but yielded little reward beyond fleeting applause. "Children should have a wonderful childhood," Maria would reflect. "I did not have it." By 1937, the family fractured irreparably. Disillusioned with George and desperate for a fresh start, Liza returned to Greece with Maria and Jackie aboard the SS Saturnia. Maria sang for passengers, her voice rising above the hum of the waves, earning applause and tips. At a party on board, she performed Carmen for the ship's captain, who presented her with a bouquet of flowers and a doll, the first she had ever received. Maria's arrival in Athens mirrored her inner turmoil, anxious, isolated, and burdened by her mother Liza's manic control. Liza, in the throes of erratic behavior, paraded Maria's voice before skeptical relatives who dismissed her talent. Their grandmother, Frasso, provided warmth, but the family's modest circumstances clashed with Liza's grandiose fantasies. Instead of the wealthy relatives Liza promised, Maria found herself sharing a small home with a struggling family, her mother's ambitions suffocating her every step. Liza's control was relentless, not only over Maria, but her older sister Jackie as well. When the family ran out of money, Liza coerced Jackie into becoming the mistress of a wealthy man to pay for Maria's singing lessons. "Either become his mistress or starve to death," Liza declared coldly. Jackie begged to return to America, to force their father to support them, but Liza refused, saying, "Do you only think of yourself? Maria needs her lessons, and you're the only one who can help." Reluctantly, Jackie complied, her resentment simmering, and the money she earned kept the family afloat. For Maria, these humiliations were compounded by the weight of her mother's expectations. Whenever Maria sought joy in simple pleasures like riding bicycles or spending time with family, Liza crushed her spirit with guilt, reminding her of the sacrifices made on her behalf. "I didn't bring you into this world for nothing," she often said, reducing Maria to a mere tool for her own unfulfilled dreams. Jackie, too, vented her frustrations, mocking Maria's weight gain and translating cruel remarks from onlookers, comparing them to Laurel and Hardy. The ridicule left Maria humiliated and resentful. Despite these struggles, Maria's raw talent began to shine. Rejected by one conservatory for her youth, she found a lifeline with Maria Travella, who offered free lessons and nurtured her potential. Maria's first public performance in 1937 brought applause and a fleeting glimpse of the acclaim she craved. Yet, her hunger for more led to tensions with Travella, whose cautious methods clashed with Maria's ambition. In a decisive move, Liza secured an audition with Elvira de Hidalgo, a renowned coloratura soprano. Maria's unpolished yet electrifying rendition of O Patria Mia stunned the room. De Hidalgo saw her potential immediately and agreed to train her for free. Under her rigorous tutelage, Maria began her transformation, mastering the demanding discipline of bel canto. Her progress wasn't without betrayal. Leaving Travella, who had worked with her like a mother, left wounds on both sides. But Maria had no choice. Her ambition demanded she grow beyond the limits of her first teacher. By 1939, her transition to the Athens Conservatory was complete, and she earned a scholarship under de Hidalgo's mentorship. It was a turning point in her fledgling career, but the cost of these successes, strained relationships, public scrutiny, and a mother who never let her forget her sacrifices, left deep scars. Maria's journey at the Athens Conservatory began in the autumn of 1939, as Europe stood on the brink of war. With the world descending into chaos, Maria immersed herself in opera, seemingly detached from the mounting tensions. Yet, the urgency of the moment was not lost on her. This panic to get on before we were engulfed by some nameless horror, Jackie later recalled, made her increasingly impatient. Under the guidance of de Hidalgo, Maria embraced the grueling discipline of bel canto. De Hidalgo, determined to rebuild her voice from the ground up, insisted on versatility, pushing Maria across the vocal spectrum. Though the demands were punishing, Maria idolized her teacher, seeing in her a nurturing presence that was absent at home. Unlike Liza, whose love was riddled with manipulation, de Hidalgo offered rare but meaningful praise, instilling Maria with the confidence to believe in her talent. Liza, however, sensed her diminishing control over Maria and resented de Hidalgo's influence. For Liza, Maria's talent was a means to an end. For de Hidalgo, it was something sacred. Their rivalry simmered beneath the surface, with Liza's frustrations spilling into petty complaints. "We've had enough. Our heads are spinning," she griped about Maria's endless rehearsals. Maria's struggles didn't end at home. Her classmates at the conservatory ridiculed her for her poverty and her appearance, mocking her as a rag doll for the hand-me-down clothes she wore. Despite these humiliations, Maria worked tirelessly, often staying late to observe other students or returning to de Hidalgo's home for extra lessons. By the end of the academic year, Maria's efforts began to bear fruit. Her performances in Puccini's Suor Angelica drew praise, though de Hidalgo, ever exacting, noted the nun's habit conveniently concealed the weight Maria had yet to lose. That same year, de Hidalgo secured Maria a year-long contract with the newly founded Greek National Opera, ensuring she would be paid to study rather than perform. "We must protect this treasure," de Hidalgo told the manager, "or she will waste her time singing for soldiers for a crust of bread." On October 28, 1940, the wail of air raid sirens shattered the dawn in Athens. Italy had invaded from Albania and the nation braced for war. 2 hours earlier, the Prime Minister had uttered his defiant cry, "God save Greece." For Maria, the sirens heralded not just the bombs, but the crumbling of life as she knew it. The streets filled with fervor, newspapers stoking patriotism, walls papered with army recruitment lists, and riots breaking out across the city. The arrival of British troops offered only the briefest illusion of calm. The shadow of war loomed ever larger, and Maria's thoughts drifted to New York, the safety of her father's distant world. Yet the pull of Elvira de Hidalgo and the artistry they were building together tethered her to Athens. As the conflict closed in, the idea of escape vanished entirely. By April 1941, the full weight of war descended. The king had fled and the prime minister had taken his own life. Maria clung to her routines, attending classes at the conservatory, even as the German army advanced. That evening, the bombing of the Piraeus port lit the night sky, the flames visible from their apartment. Athens itself was spared, but the swastika soon hung over the Acropolis, a grim proclamation of occupation. The air raid sirens became a regular torment, sending Maria, Jackie, and Liza racing down 120 steps to the basement shelter. Each time Maria's nerves unraveled, she vomited from fear at the sound, her body betraying her every effort to remain composed. Food disappeared almost overnight. Boiled cabbage became a luxury, and what little bread they could find was often salvaged from bins. Hunger hollowed Maria, yet she returned to the conservatory, determined to excel. De Hidalgo, unyielding in her demands, pushed Maria to channel her struggles into her voice. One night, the conservatory's fragile veneer of safety cracked entirely. Maria stayed late to study, alone in a classroom when a male teacher entered. His intentions quickly turned violent, and Maria escaped only by sheer will. Running home in tears, she recounted the ordeal to Liza. Her mother's response was as cruel as it was heartless. A pity he didn't succeed. Then we would have made him marry you. And that would have been that. By 1942, Maria's voice had become the family's sole lifeline. Invited to perform in Thessaloniki, she sang in a city devastated by war. The streets bore scars of relentless bombing. Amputees begged for food while Nazi officers dined lavishly above. Payment came not in drachmas, but in precious rations. Sugar, bread, coffee, currency of survival. Back in Athens, she performed in a nightclub rumored to be a brothel. German and Italian officers paid her in food. And although whispers of liaisons followed her, Maria offered only a measured response. The Italians were always good to me. Far more humiliating was Liza's arrangement with an Italian fascist officer who frequented their apartment. To Maria's disgust, he was one of many men who brought parcels of food in exchange for Liza's companionship. Cigarette smoke and the sound of drunken laughter filled their home, each visit a reminder of their indignity. Maria's resentment boiled over, her hatred for her mother solidifying with each passing day. She could forgive Liza for insisting that she sing for the enemy. Her voice had kept them alive. But when Liza tried to get Maria to engage in prostitution, her resentment boiled over. In a rare moment of defiance, Maria confronted her mother, and the two shouted at one another. Liza, enraged, turned her out of the apartment. Alone and humiliated, Maria found solace in the pity of strangers. It seems incredulous, she reflected years later, but they gave me money for nothing in return. Liza, however, never believed her. Convinced Maria had sold herself, she accused her daughter of prostitution, a falsehood Maria would never forgive. In 1943, Maria performed sporadically at the National Opera, taking on smaller roles that didn't match her ambition. Despite the challenges, de Hidalgo remained her unwavering advocate, calling her more than just a singer. She was a complete artist. Life under Nazi occupation brought its own humiliations. Food was scarce, and Maria endured the whispers and accusations of those around her. Gossip claimed her success came from consorting with Italian and German officers, a bitter rumor that cut deeply. Yet Maria remained resolute. Her voice, refined through relentless discipline, became a beacon of hope in a war-torn world. Her rising prominence fueled jealousy within the National Opera. By 1944, she was elevated to prima donna status, becoming the opera's highest-paid soloist. Every drachma, however, went straight to Liza, further straining their relationship. Yet, Maria persisted, determined that her voice would one day transcend the confines of Athens and the horrors of war. Maria's story during these years was one of resilience forged in suffering. Each triumph illuminated her talent but came at immense personal cost. On stage, she shone with brilliance. Off stage, she bore the scars of betrayal and sacrifice, each shaping her into the artist who would later captivate the world. As the Germans withdrew from Athens on October 11, 1944, the city exhaled in collective relief. 2 days later, British and American soldiers replaced the swastika over the Acropolis with Allied flags. Yet the euphoria of liberation quickly gave way to unrest. The communists clashed with national unity government, turning Athens into a city of fear and retribution. At the National Opera, whispers of collaboration turned to accusations. Maria, ostracized for singing during the occupation, became a target. A mob surrounded her, shouting, "Traitor!" and pelting her with accusations. One performer struck her so violently she fled. The opera's doors soon closed, erasing her name from its programs. Desperation drove Maria to take a job as a translator at the British General Headquarters. On December 3rd, gunfire erupted as British forces clashed with communist sympathizers. Advised to remain at the GHQ, Maria insisted on returning home, only to find her building overrun by snipers. "We will kill Maria first," they said. Then Liza. Days turned into a nightmare. Food was scarce, their apartment cold and unsafe. Machine gun fire riddled the walls, killing their beloved canaries as they huddled in fear. Salvation came disguised as a coal vendor, a boy sent to escort Maria to safety. Wrapping herself in layers, she navigated rubble-strewn streets, her survival hanging by a thread. 2 days later, the boy returned for Litza, reuniting them at the GHQ, where for the first time in weeks, they bathed in hot water and ate without fear. By February, a fragile peace emerged, though the city bore the scars of conflict. Refugees flooded Athens, food remained scarce, and the National Opera reopened. Maria resumed her contract, stepping into a company haunted by loss, members killed, hostages returned, and bitter rivalries festering beneath the surface. The opera, crumbling under economic collapse, demoted Maria, slashing her rank and salary. Whispers of sabotage grew louder. Rivals branded her a collaborator and ensured her contract wasn't renewed. With Athens stifling her ambition, Maria decided to leave, while De Hidalgo told her to go to Italy. Maria had decided to return to America. Since 1942, she had been exchanging letters with her father, George. When he sent her $100, Litza bristled with anger. "You and your father," she snapped. "I don't want to hear another word about that man." Her farewells were bittersweet. While Maria packed her meager belongings, 3 or 4 dresses, a small wardrobe, and an unshakable determination. The night before she left, she phoned De Hidalgo. "I will always think of you," Maria promised. "I owe everything to you." De Hidalgo pleaded with her to stay. "You must not leave," she warned, but Maria's mind was made up. Neither Jackie nor Litza accompanied her to the port. Maria sailed to America with $700 borrowed from the U.S. government, some hope, and countless doubts. Behind her lay a fractured past, ahead, the vast unknown. She arrived in New York on October 9, 1945, filled with hope and dreams of triumph in her beloved America. Her reunion with her estranged father, George, felt like a resurrection, but the joy quickly faded. George, who had coaxed her back with promises of love, had little interest in supporting her ambitions. Instead, he treated her like a housekeeper. "I've had quite a shock," Maria confided to her godfather's wife, though she told others a different story, boasting of fur coats and pocket money, spinning a picture of warmth and support to mask her growing disillusionment. Her new life in New York was far from the glamorous one she imagined. Staying at the dilapidated Hotel Times Square near Hell's Kitchen, Maria was isolated, broke, and struggling. She turned to food for comfort, her weight climbing to 218 pounds. Desperate for opportunities, she worked at a restaurant in Greenwich Village, auditioned at the Metropolitan Opera, and met with rejection after rejection. When told to build her career in Italy first, Maria snapped, "When I've made my career in Italy, I'll no longer have need of you." Relief came in the form of Louise Casalati and her husband, Eddie Bagarozzi, who offered lessons and guidance, but their intentions were far from pure. Bagarozzi seduced Maria, while Casalati enabled the affair, leaving Maria emotionally entangled in their toxic dynamic. Vulnerable and eager for approval, Maria let them control her career. Bagarozzi convinced her to reject a 3-year contract with the Metropolitan Opera, claiming it wasn't worthy of her talent. Instead, he cast her in a disastrous production of Turandot and created a media spectacle that quickly unraveled. The company went bankrupt, leaving Maria humiliated and stranded. Amid this chaos, Maria's mother, Litza, arrived in New York. Her presence reignited old tensions. She criticized Maria's weight relentlessly, imposing a strict diet that left Maria rapidly shedding pounds. Within weeks, Litza ousted George's mistress from the apartment, triggering a wave of arguments and threats. Their home became a battleground, pushing Maria further into despair. Salvation came through Giovanni Zanatello, the artistic director of the Verona Festival. In a fateful audition, Maria's performance of Casta Diva captivated him. "She's a revelation," he declared, offering her a contract. The problem was money. Maria couldn't afford the journey to Italy, and George, dismissive of her dreams, suggested she marry instead. Once again, Maria turned to her godfather, securing a loan that became her ticket to freedom. On June 17, 1947, Maria set sail from New York. The journey was grueling, cramped cabins, boiled potatoes, and long days at sea, but her resolve never wavered. Arriving in Verona, she was greeted with skepticism. Critics questioned why a Greek soprano had been chosen for an Italian festival. But Maria pressed on, fueled by the belief that her destiny awaited her. Rehearsals for La Gioconda were filled with challenges, including a stage accident that left Maria injured. Yet, on August 2, 1947, she performed before 25,000 people at the Arena di Verona. Reviews praised her passionate and powerful voice, though much of the acclaim went to her co-stars. Maria's triumph was bittersweet, marred by criticism of her appearance and whispers about her background. Her personal life in Italy also became turbulent. Giovanni Battista Meneghini, known as Tita, a wealthy brick manufacturer, entered her life, offering both financial support and companionship. Maria mistook his generosity for love, believing he was sent by God to save her from loneliness. Their relationship, however, proved complicated. Tita's feelings cooled over time, and his friends mocked Maria's appearance and motives, calling her a gold digger. Though Tita would later exploit Maria's burgeoning fame, these early experiences in Verona laid the groundwork for her transformation from a struggling artist into the legendary Maria Callas, whose brilliance would ultimately outshine the hardships she endured. Maria Callas in 1947 stood on the precipice of despair. Homeless, nearly penniless, and emotionally crushed, she confessed, "I knew I had failed. All that work, all those years, for nothing. I understood why people end their lives." Her visa was expiring, her prospects evaporating, and she had nowhere to turn but to Tita, a man she both loved and feared she relied on too much. In a letter to him, she confessed her hesitation. "Yesterday, I decided to leave because it seemed you were bored with me, but I only packed half my baggage. I hoped for a word, a gesture from you to make me stay." This wasn't love as most imagine it. It was raw, desperate dependency. To Maria, Tita was both savior and jailer. In Verona, she moved into his modest room above a restaurant, scandalizing the conservative locals. They whispered about the American, living in sin. But Maria, blinded by love, envisioned a future as his wife, even dreaming of abandoning her career. A deeply felt love is worth more than a lousy career that leaves you with nothing but a name, she mused. But Tita's feelings were less poetic. He saw her not as a star, but as a project. "When I met her, she was fat, clumsy, dressed like a dog. A real gypsy," he said bluntly. "Despite her ardent declarations, 'I live for you, my tiniest feelings belong to you.'" Tita dismissed her as another voice to be managed. Even when he secured her an audition with Mario Labrocca of La Scala, she was rejected outright. "She's not worth anything," Labrocca told him. Send her back to America, yet fate, it seems, had other plans. Through sheer persistence, Tita arranged another audition, this time with the legendary conductor Tullio Serafine. Serafine saw something in her. He offered her roles, and for the first time, Maria's fortunes began to shift. But even then, she doubted herself, admitting, "By nature, I consider I'm not worth much." In Venice, Serafine became her mentor, shaping the raw talent others had overlooked. But their relationship wasn't without its challenges. When Serafine made an inappropriate advance, Maria shut him down. "He won't dare do that anymore," she reassured Tita. Her resilience was as fierce as her talent. By December, Maria debuted at Teatro La Fenice, battling resistance from critics who questioned her ability. Yet her performances silenced doubters. The praise was tempered by her own humility. "We singers are nothing. Art is immense." Still, the road ahead was fraught with struggle. Her performances in provincial venues, enduring migraines and hormonal shifts, took a toll. Letters to Tita painted a picture of exhaustion and loneliness. "Did you think of me?" she asked. "I'm not well. My heart breaks even as I speak." Then came the breakthrough, Norma in Florence. Despite battling appendicitis, Maria delivered a performance so moving that Serafine visited her dressing room in tears. Critics were captivated. "This young artist is versed in the most demanding traditions of Italian bel canto," they wrote. It was a triumph, but one marked by pain, as Maria underwent surgery shortly after. Maria's personal life, however, remained tumultuous. Tita's family openly despised her, and his coldness deepened her insecurities. Yet her devotion to him was unshaken. When Tita finally proposed, it was under pressure. Maria, desperate for stability, declared, "If you don't marry me, I will never sing again." On April 21st, 1949, they wed in a hastily arranged ceremony. Hours later, Maria boarded a ship to Buenos Aires for what she believed would be her final engagement. "I thought I was leaving my career behind," she later said. "Who would have known I was to become Callas?" On board, she wrote daily letters to her husband, expressing her longing for home and pleading never to be sent so far away again. "I am alive only when I am with you," she wrote, surrendering to a dependence that tethered her happiness to his presence. 2 weeks passed in silence before a single telegram from him arrived, bringing her to tears. Docking in Rio, Maria declined offers to extend her tour. Despite the accolades awaiting her, she confided in her letters that her heart remained elsewhere. Buenos Aires initially dazzled her with its grandeur, but the city's oppressive smog and Perón's regime soon clouded her enthusiasm. Isolated and homesick, Maria turned to her art for solace, her letters a lifeline to a husband who rarely responded. Her debut was triumphant, her voice soaring with a power that awed audiences. Yet illness soon cast its shadow, and Maria found herself battling influenza as she prepared for Norma. Her performances were met with rapturous applause, but no ovation could fill the growing void in her heart. In a rare gesture, her estranged father sent a letter calling her his pride and joy. Before leaving Argentina, Maria faced the grim reality that her earnings could not be transferred abroad. She spent the money on fur coats and gifts for her family, only to be met with further resentment. Litza accused her of selfishness, complaining the gifts were cheap, writing bitter letters that deepened Maria's sense of inadequacy. "You have cast me aside despite your promises," her mother wrote, twisting every act of generosity into guilt. Back in Italy, she delighted in homemaking, cooking elaborate meals for her husband while subsisting on little herself, raw vegetables and steak tartare. She longed for a child, yearning for the stability of a family, but Tita dismissed her desires, seeing a pregnancy as a threat to her career. Professionally, Maria's voice captivated audiences, yet her personal life spiraled into deeper loneliness. "I'm as lonely as a stray dog," she confessed. Even as she triumphed on stages around the world, Maria struggled to reconcile her public adoration with her private despair. In Mexico, her performances solidified her status as the definitive soprano of her generation. Critics hailed her as a living legend, but the demands of her career exacted a toll. She suffered from aching bones, insomnia, and a constant sense of unease. Tita dismissed her ailments as psychological, while Litza, ever the manipulator, discouraged her dreams of motherhood. Instead, demanding a monthly allowance, a diamond ring, and a fur coat for Maria's sister, Jackie. "After all, Maria," she wrote, "we have done so much for you." When Maria discovered that Litza had hidden thousands of dollars in savings, despite claiming destitution, her disillusionment was complete. Yet even then, Maria sent her mother money, paid her father's debts, and bought Litza a mink coat. Her gestures of generosity were met with criticism and disdain. No gift, no sacrifice was ever enough. Envy among colleagues, her mother's relentless demands, and Tita's emotional distance compounded her loneliness. Maria's life was a paradox. The voice that captivated the world was born of suffering, the woman behind the legend trapped between triumph and tragedy. Her art, forged in hardship, resonated with an intensity that only a life of profound highs and lows could produce. Maria longed for love, loyalty, and the stability of a family, but Tita dismissed her dreams. Even her desire for a child was met with indifference, leaving Maria to confide her pain in letters. "All I ever wanted," she wrote years later, "was respect and loyalty." Was that too much to ask? Maria poured herself into her art, and in 1951 she triumphed in Mexico City, dazzling critics with her performances in La Traviata. One critic proclaimed, "God lavished his gifts on Maria Callas. She is majestic, elegant, and above all, a voice unlike any other." But beneath the praise lay tensions that would define her time in Brazil. Her simmering rivalry with Renata Tebaldi boiled over in Rio de Janeiro. During a benefit concert, Tebaldi broke their agreement not to sing encores, sparking Maria's ire. Later at a dinner, Maria's critique of Tebaldi's repertoire led Tita to silence her with a kick under the table. Maria turned on him, declaring, "You are stupido. Leave me alone, and don't you dare interrupt me." The feud spilled into the public eye, with Tebaldi remarking, "Madame Callas in life is not beautiful, but on stage she appears so." The press branded Maria as the devil to Tibaldi's angel, a narrative that Maria countered with biting candor. She is as nasty and as sly as they come. Amid these clashes, Maria endured personal humiliation. A hotel waiter attempted to assault her, forcing her to relocate. The opera house manager, Barreto Pinto, undermined her at every turn, relegating her to non-subscription nights and taunting her when she demanded her pay. In a rage, Maria seized a bronze inkstand, ready to hurl it at him before being restrained. Hours later, her fee and 2 plane tickets arrived at her hotel. Returning to Italy, Maria faced new battles at La Scala. Antonio Guringhelli, loyal to Tibaldi, resisted her demands to stage La Traviata. Their negotiations ended with Maria's ultimatum: "Let's continue this conversation next year." Minutes later, Guringhelli relented, inviting her to open the season. By 1952, Maria was the most electrifying soprano of her generation. Critics hailed her Norma at La Scala as transformative, declaring her the most exciting singer on stage today. Yet, personal betrayals persisted. Her mother, Liza, bombarded her with guilt-laden letters, accusing Maria of abandonment. "I worshipped you as a god, loving you more than your sister," Liza wrote. "I may never see you again before I die." Maria's biting response, later destroyed, was rumored to have included the words, "If you can't earn enough to live on, throw yourself out the window." Even as her fame grew, Maria's insecurities loomed large. Her transformation began in 1953 when she embarked on a drastic weight loss journey, shedding 26 pounds. Critics speculated that she had swallowed a tapeworm with a glass of champagne, something which Tita later said was true, but Maria dismissed the rumors. "You can't portray a beautiful young woman if you're enormous," she said. With her slimmer figure came a commanding stage presence that redefined operatic performance. Her Medea at La Scala, conducted by Leonard Bernstein, cemented her legacy. Channeling her frustrations into the role, Maria became the sorceress, complex, vengeful, unforgettable. Critics hailed her as a revelation, with Franco Zeffirelli declaring, "There was before Callas and there was after Callas." Maria's meteoric rise left Tibaldi in her shadow. By the end of the season, Tibaldi resigned, unable to compete with the force of Maria's artistry. As L'Europeo wrote, "If these were better times for music, Maria Callas would be the most famous woman in Europe." In 1954, Maria embarked on a radical journey of reinvention. She shed nearly 70 pounds, transforming her figure into one befitting her heroines. She underwent iodine injections, hormonal therapy, and rumors swirled about plastic surgeries. Her new figure demanded a wardrobe to match. Maria embraced Parisian couture, accumulating fur coats, tailored suits, and custom gowns. Her collection of 300 hats, 100 fur coats, and 150 pairs of shoes became legendary. She was known never to wear the same pair of gloves twice, giving them away after each show. Yet, even as she perfected her image, her personal life remained fraught. Her husband, Tita, dismissed her transformation, preferring the woman she had been. Unbeknownst to Maria, he frequented brothels, seeking what she had worked so hard to leave behind. Professionally, Maria reached new heights. In January 1955, her performance at La Scala became the stuff of legend. Her mad scene left the audience in stunned silence, erupting into 12 curtain calls and a cascade of red carnations. Yet backstage, Maria wept. "I always feel I've failed," she confided. Her relentless pursuit of perfection was both her greatest strength and her heaviest burden. As her fame grew, so did the whispers. Critics questioned whether her weight loss had weakened her powerful diaphragm. Maria dismissed the claims, saying, "I made my greatest recordings when I was thin." But behind the bravado, her voice began to show signs of strain, a reflection of the physical and emotional toll her transformation demanded. Maria's La Traviata that same year showcased her dramatic realism. Her Violetta, from opulent debutante to dying waif, embodied the role's emotional complexity. When fans of Renata Tibaldi hissed and threw radishes onto the stage, Maria brushed it off with grace. "Let them compare," she offered. "If Tibaldi can sing Norma one night, then La Traviata the next, only then will we be rivals." By the mid-1950s, Maria was both celebrated and scrutinized, a woman whose every triumph was shadowed by whispers of scandal and personal sacrifice. In October 1955, Maria performed at Chicago's Lyric Opera. The city greeted her with fervor, dubbing her the European Marilyn Monroe. Critics were rapturous, with the New York Times declaring she restored the ancient luster to the title of prima donna. But behind the scenes, Maria faced chaos. Former associate Bagarozzi filed a lawsuit, process servers ambushed her backstage, and she was forced to flee in a freight elevator. The final blow came after her performance in Madame Butterfly, when the sheriff's deputies cornered her in her dressing room to serve her court papers. Shoving the papers down the front of her kimono, enraged and humiliated, Maria stormed out, warning, "Chicago will be sorry for this. I will never sing here again." Bagarozzi accused Maria of ruthless ambition, claiming she owed him tens of thousands for her rise to stardom. Maria countered, accusing him of manipulation and coercion. The drama spilled into the U.S. District Court, a reflection of the fierce battle between Maria's vulnerabilities and the unyielding public image she cultivated. Returning to La Scala just after her 32nd birthday, Maria opened in Norma at a gala attended by Italian President Giovanni Granchi. But backstage, tensions boiled over. Her co-star Mario Del Monaco orchestrated a group of Tebaldi fans to drown out Maria's ovation, reducing her to tears. Even vegetables were thrown onto the stage, a symbolic act of the hostility she faced. Publicly, she remained composed, famously stating, "I'll do everything I can so as not to dismount my tiger," embracing her reputation as the Tigress of Opera. Her pursuit of perfection created friction with collaborators. In Vienna, her performance earned a 20-minute ovation, but divided critics. Frustrated with Carillon's decision to encore a sextet before her grueling mad scene, Maria turned her back on him during the act, a bold display of defiance that only Maria could execute. In the meantime, Bagarozzi threatened to release intimate letters Maria had written to him, exposing their intimate correspondence. Amidst the tumult, her plans to record La Traviata were given to another soprano. In London, Maria's 1957 performances of Norma brought 6-minute ovations and a rare encore, the first at Covent Garden in 25 years. In January 1958, Maria Callas faced one of the most dramatic scandals of her career at the Teatro dell'Opera in Rome. Scheduled to perform Norma at a gala honoring the President of Italy, she awoke with bronchitis and tracheitis, but reluctantly agreed to sing, knowing the weight of the occasion. From the start, it was clear something was wrong. Her voice faltered during Casta Diva, drawing jeers from the audience. By intermission, chaos erupted backstage. Her husband decided she could not continue. When management suggested she fake a fainting spell on stage to appease the crowd, Maria refused, declaring, "I will not deceive my audience." When the second act was canceled, the theater erupted into pandemonium. Furious patrons rioted and gathered outside her hotel, shouting insults. Maria had to be smuggled out through an underground passage. The next day, a doctor confirmed her illness, but the press was unforgiving. Italian newspapers branded her an undisciplined diva, while English tabloids fabricated outrageous rumors of tantrums and parties. Parliament denounced her, the Teatro dell'Opera banned her, and a lawsuit for $13,000 only deepened the fallout. By the late 1950s, Maria stood at the edge of a transformative chapter in her life, marked by professional triumphs, personal disillusionment, and the pull of a new and tantalizing world. Her career had reached soaring heights, but the cracks in her carefully constructed image, both as an artist and a wife, were beginning to show. In July 1959, Maria retreated to her villa with her husband, hoping for respite. Once a sanctuary, their home had become a battleground of arguments and bitterness. Maria's desire to retire from opera and start a family was met with Tita's resistance. He dismissed her dreams, insisting they couldn't afford for her to stop working. Upon closer scrutiny, Maria discovered the devastating truth. The fortune she had painstakingly earned had been squandered by Tita on debts and dubious investments. "You can't retire because you can't afford to," he told her bluntly. The revelation was a breaking point. As she later confided, "My eyes were opened to a husband who was a pimp." At the same time, a new figure entered Maria's orbit. Aristotle Onassis, the Greek shipping magnate whose bold charm and larger-than-life presence contrasted sharply with Tita's small-mindedness. Onassis had been pursuing Maria with a relentless confidence, sending roses to her suite at the Ritz and signing them enigmatically as the other Greek. His attention intrigued her, offering a glimpse of the freedom and adoration she desperately craved. The invitation to join Onassis on his luxurious yacht, the Christina, came at a moment when Maria's marriage was unraveling. Initially reluctant, she was swayed by Tita's eagerness to meet Sir Winston Churchill, who was also a guest. Yet Maria harbored doubts about Tita, whose limited English and graceless demeanor often left him out of place among her cosmopolitan friends. The prospect of the glamorous Onassis, an escape from the stifling confines of her crumbling marriage, proved irresistible. The couple arrived in Monte Carlo, checking into the opulent Hotel Hermitage. Awaiting Maria was a cryptic note from Elsa Maxwell, the sharp-tongued socialite. From now on, try to enjoy every moment of your life. Take everything, which is a delicate art. Give what you can, which is not delicate but important. At dinner with Onassis and Maxwell that evening, tensions simmered. The conversation held in English excluded Tita entirely. Onassis, ever the provocateur, leaned toward Maria and remarked in Greek, "When dealing with the wicked, the gods first deprive them of their senses." Maria, intrigued, replied, "Are you wicked?" The next morning, Maria stepped aboard the Christina. It was a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of her life. Drawn by the promise of glamour, freedom, and Onassis's intoxicating world, she set sail toward a future that was as uncertain as it was alluring. Beneath the surface of luxury and opulence lay the undercurrents of transformation, a step away from the constraints of her past and into the unknown. Maria Callas, once tethered by duty and loyalty, was beginning to break free. As she wrote to her friend, "All my instincts tell me, big things are about to happen." Among the glittering elite on board were Sir Winston Churchill and his family, adding gravitas to a voyage that promised glamour, but also heralded seismic change in Maria's life. Maria's presence, with her rose-printed beach pajamas and nervous demeanor, drew quiet scorn from the sophisticated crowd. Meanwhile, Tita's boisterous attempts at affection, whistling, and kissing Maria earned disdain from their polished company. Despite the unease, Maria's attention gravitated toward Onassis. His confidence, charisma, and tales of resilience captivated her. Speaking in their shared Greek, they bonded over their tumultuous pasts. While others saw Onassis as a brash opportunist, Maria admired his unapologetic audacity. During the cruise, their connection deepened, culminating in a fateful evening under the stars as Stromboli erupted in the distance, a metaphor for the passions stirring within Maria. By the time the yacht docked in Smyrna, Onassis's birthplace, Maria's feelings for him were undeniable. Their shared Greek heritage, Onassis's confessions of hardship, and their stolen moments created an intimacy that could no longer be ignored. As the Christina sailed toward Istanbul, they slipped away for a private boat ride, their connection crossing an irreversible threshold. That night, Maria returned to her cabin, where Tita's suspicions erupted into a bitter confrontation. "You're suffocating me," she lashed out, signaling the beginning of the end of their marriage. By August, the affair was impossible to conceal. A midnight encounter between Maria and Onassis beneath a counterfeit El Greco painting pushed Tina Onassis to take decisive action, swiftly seeking a divorce. For more on this divorce and the effect it had on their young daughter, as well as her relationship with Jackie Kennedy, please see our video on Christina Onassis. Upon returning to Milan, Maria confronted Tita, admitting her love for Onassis and expressing her desire to leave their marriage. "What would you do if I no longer wanted to stay with you?" she asked, a question that was more a declaration of intent. Her decision to part ways had been made before the cruise. She had even written to her lawyer, requesting guidance on a swift separation. For Maria, Onassis represented freedom, a chance to escape the constraints of her marriage and career. Yet the fallout was immediate and brutal. Tita publicly accused her of betrayal, declaring, "I created Callas, and she repaid me by stabbing me in the back." Their exchanges turned venomous, with Maria threatening to confront him with a gun, and Tita retorting that he'd be waiting with a machine gun of his own. Even as the public and press vilified her, Maria remained resolute. Her love for Onassis was more than an affair, it was an awakening. In his bold, unapologetic embrace of life, she saw a mirror of her own unyielding desire for freedom. Yet the relationship, marked by intensity and instability, would bring its own complications, a prelude to the next dramatic chapter in the life of Maria Callas. By the early 1960s, Maria Callas's life was a storm of passion, betrayal, and ambition, reflected in every note she sang and every choice she made. Her recurring dream, packing suitcases with Aristotle Onassis against a backdrop of mud, became an eerie metaphor for the futility she felt in their relationship. Though deeply in love, Maria faced a man whose loyalty and commitment were as fleeting as the waves on which his yacht sailed. Maria's longing for motherhood, an unfulfilled dream she had cherished for over a decade, added another layer to her anguish. In early 1960, she conceived a child with Onassis, but what should have been a moment of joy turned into heartbreak. Onassis, ever pragmatic, demanded she terminate the pregnancy, offering money as if it could erase her pain. For Maria, this rejection was a devastating blow, compounded by Italy's patriarchal laws, which meant her estranged husband would have legal claim over her child. Amid these personal crises, Maria's professional struggles intensified. She returned to London to record after a long hiatus, but her vocal stamina had waned, leaving her uncertain about her future on stage. In Brussels, a planned concert was cancelled due to illness, a likely complication of her pregnancy. When her pregnancy ended, whether by miscarriage or abortion, remains unclear. The loss left her emotionally shattered, further isolating her from the world she had once commanded. Onassis's indifference during this period was glaring. As Maria mourned, he embarked on a month-long cruise with Winston Churchill, dismissing her as a potential embarrassment. Publicly, he denied their relationship, calling Maria's announcement of their supposed engagement a joke. For Maria, who had anchored her identity in love and loyalty, this was a betrayal of the highest order. Yet, even as her spirit wavered, Maria clung to her art. Her performance in Norma at the ancient theater of Epidaurus was a triumphant return to her Greek roots. Donating her entire fee to establish a scholarship fund, she sought to honor the culture that had shaped her. But the physical and emotional toll was evident. Illness forced her to cancel her final performance, a reminder that even the great Callas was not invincible. Maria confided in a friend that she felt her voice was bleeding. By late 1960, Maria's return to La Scala epitomized her dual existence. The anticipation was electric, with the theater adorned with thousands of carnations and an audience of royalty and Hollywood elites. But while her acting dazzled, her voice faltered, drawing hisses from the crowd. Even in her vulnerability, she turned her struggles into art, her raw emotion cutting through every note. Through it all, Maria endured. Her love for Onassis, though consuming, was increasingly marked by his cruelty and manipulation. "You can't live without me," he told her, not as an expression of devotion, but as a claim of possession. Friends noted how she seemed to shrink under his shadow, her fiery independence replaced by a desperate need for approval. The diva who had captivated the world now found herself at a crossroads. Torn between the woman she was and the woman she yearned to be, her life mirrored the operatic tragedies she so vividly brought to the stage. As 1961 began, she burned her stage costumes, a symbolic act of severing ties with her past. Yet, the flames couldn't erase the struggles that lay ahead, nor could they extinguish the embers of her artistry, which continued to burn even as her personal life unraveled. In public, Onassis kept the illusion alive. On Maria's 40th birthday, he orchestrated an opulent celebration in Paris. Surrounded by sparkling chandeliers and flutes of champagne, Maria allowed herself to believe that the man she loved still cared for her. But the truth became painfully clear during their trip to Haiti to meet the infamous dictator François Duvalier. Onassis had brought Maria along, not as his beloved, but as a pawn to charm the dictator and secure a business deal. Witnesses described her composure during the visit, masking the sting of being used. It was as though he paraded her like a trophy, one observer remarked. The betrayal of her trust wasn't confined to business. Onassis's wandering eye and unrelenting infidelity were no secret, but when Lee Radziwill entered the picture, the humiliation became unbearable. Lee, the younger sister of Jackie Kennedy, was everything Onassis admired, youthful, socially connected, and unburdened by the complexities that came with loving Maria. The affair wasn't subtle. Onassis flaunted his infatuation with Lee, bringing her aboard his yacht, the Christina, and relegating Maria to the sidelines. Maria watched as Onassis lavished attention on Lee, escorting her on walks along the deck and positioning her beside him during meals. It was a cruel inversion of her former status on the yacht, where she had once reigned as its queen. The pain was magnified when Jacqueline Kennedy joined the cruise as an invited guest. Onassis took Jackie on a tour of Smyrna, the city of his childhood. From a distance, Maria watched as he pointed out landmarks and shared stories, moments they had once shared together. 4 years ago, that was me, she reflected bitterly. It was a public spectacle, a painful reminder of how far she had fallen in his affections. For more on the relationship between Jackie and her sister Lee, and all their loves, triumphs, and betrayals, please check out our video on the channel. Maria's humiliation wasn't limited to Lee and Jackie. He mocked her eating habits, ridiculed her slender frame, and encouraged his staff to treat her with the same cold detachment. Yet Maria clung to the hope that she could reignite the love they once shared. During a dinner party, emboldened by wine and the need for reassurance, she teased Onassis, suggesting he marry her. His response was devastating. "Maria, I can't do that. This is a pay-as-you-go arrangement." In that moment, the truth she had avoided became inescapable. She was a convenience, a fleeting indulgence in his endless quest for power and status. While the world speculated about their relationship, Maria endured the anguish in silence. Her friends noticed her growing isolation, her once fiery spirit subdued. "It was her silence that struck me most," a friend recalled. Even her body became a battlefield. Maria adhered to a punishing diet, measuring every meal to fit Onassis's preferences. Yet, no matter how much weight she lost, he derided her, comparing her unfavorably to fuller-figured women. Behind closed doors, she would binge on cakes or ice cream, her private rebellion against his control. The betrayals took their toll. Maria's voice, once the instrument of her unparalleled artistry, began to falter. At a concert in Copenhagen, critics noted her diminished range, and one remarked, "The diva's soul is still there, but her voice is a ghost." Maria confided, "Unhappy birds cannot sing." After President Kennedy's assassination, Onassis's pursuit of Jackie intensified, leaving Maria to grapple with the growing distance between them. Publicly, Onassis denied any romantic involvement with Maria, dismissing speculation with a casual shrug. Privately, he continued to wield his control over her, ensuring she remained tethered to him even as he courted another. She sought refuge in her music, pouring her heartbreak into performances that were both her solace and torment. The weight of her legendary reputation buckled her health. Dismissed by doctors as suffering from psychological flu, Maria's struggles extended from the stage to her family. Her father faked cancer to extort money, and her mother cursed her with throat cancer when she refused financial support. Yet the stage offered little reprieve. In Paris, a fraught Norma divided audiences. A cracked note in a climactic scene caused a stir, but Maria composed herself and delivered a flawless reprise. Onassis, watching from the audience, momentarily rekindled her hope, only to deepen her heartbreak as his affair with Jacqueline Kennedy unfolded. His charm masked a manipulative streak, treating Maria like a possession. After Maria confronted him over a love letter to Lee Radziwill, despair overcame her, and she took an overdose of sleeping pills. Onassis found her unconscious, but rather than calling for help, paced her apartment with her limp body in his arms until she regained consciousness. When Maria awoke, she dismissed the episode with chilling resignation. "In operas, I've played heroines who die for love. That's something I can understand." Maria's career mirrored her personal struggles. Her triumphant 1965 return to the Metropolitan Opera in Tosca marked her first appearance in 7 years. Critics noted the diminished power of her voice, yet audiences roared with approval, their applause tinged with nostalgia. Jacqueline Kennedy's arrival in the audience added a voyeuristic tension to the evening, the past and present colliding in one poignant moment. Onassis's dual life, weekends in Paris with Maria, weekdays in New York with Jackie, exposed the depth of his duplicity. Still, Maria clung to the illusion of love. When he attended one of her Norma performances, His presence reinvigorated her. "Can't you see?" she confided to Franco Zeffirelli. "He adores me. He can't live without me." By the summer of 1965, Maria's exhaustion was palpable. Her career reached a devastating low when she collapsed on stage during the final performance of Norma in Paris. Injected with stimulants to combat her failing health, she managed to reach the third act before crumpling mid-performance. Backstage, a doctor administered Coramine and massaged her chest in a desperate attempt to revive her. She remained slumped on the sofa, her voice silenced and her body betraying her. The audience, subdued rather than hostile, responded to the abrupt cancellation with nervous laughter and scattered cries of "refund." When Maria regained consciousness, she attempted to dress and return to the stage, but collapsed again, whispering through tears, "I know I've let you down. I'm so sorry. I promise you all that one day I shall return to win your forgiveness and justify your love." Onassis mocked her. "What are you?" "Nothing," he reportedly screamed. "You just have a whistle in your throat that no longer works." His contempt escalated, culminating in a public slap that reduced her to tears. "You're only good for sex," he sneered, "and you're not even good for that anymore." Maria's final opera performance at Covent Garden in Tosca was a muted farewell to the stage. Panic consumed her in the lead-up, resulting in repeated cancellations until only one royal gala performance remained. Though she sang competently, the fire of her earlier years was extinguished. The audience's distant applause reflected a collective mourning for what once was. Critics were merciless. "Yesterday, only the ashes were seen. The fire was extinguished," one wrote. The Evening Standard observed, "The voice is gone, but the ghost of her greatness lingers." Yet, even Onassis's abuse could not sever the connection she felt to him. When asked why she stayed, Maria admitted, "He was the first to make me feel like a woman, the first to really make love to me. I can't lose him." Onassis's relationship with Jacqueline Kennedy was no longer whispered secrets, but a glaring truth. Yet Maria continued to cling to the hope of a future together, even as her once indomitable spirit fractured under the weight of betrayal. "It's a kind of madness," she confessed of her enduring love, but nobody chooses to be mad. Her search for liberation led her to renounce her American citizenship in favor of Greek nationality. Officially, the move was to sever ties with her estranged husband, as Greek law did not recognize marriages performed outside the Orthodox Church. Yet even as she navigated bureaucratic barriers, Meneghini clung to her life like a ghost, reminding her of their unresolved legal entanglements and pressing her for money. At Scorpios, their fortress of supposed intimacy, Maria confided, "After 40, one no longer has any illusions. One knows that happiness is nothing but a dream." Onassis's sharp insults and the erosion of her identity left her feeling hollow, each barb cutting deeper into her fragile confidence. By 1966, their relationship had descended into a toxic cycle of mutual destruction. Onassis, his health deteriorating from heavy drinking and drug use, became erratic and violent. Maria, desperate to save him, brought a doctor from Paris and pleaded with him to curb his vices. Onassis responded with defiance, increasing his intake of alcohol and mixing Nembutal with amphetamines and steroids. Her concern met with disdain. Onassis delighted in tormenting her, escalating her anxieties with calculated cruelty. All Greek men beat their women, he justified after striking her during one argument. He who loves well beats well. Maria, conditioned by the cycles of charm and violence, walked on eggshells in his presence. She changed outfits multiple times before dining with him, knowing the wrong choice could ignite his fury. "He knew where to hit you till it hurt," she confided, "and it wouldn't show in the morning." The abuse escalated to life-threatening intensity. During one particularly brutal episode, Maria feared she might not survive. Yet even in moments of despair, she found a kernel of defiance. "You can kill me," she told him through tears, "but you can't break me." Maria retreated from public view. Her spirit battered, she confided to a close friend. "I have played heroines who endure betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, but never did I think I would live it myself." Yet still, she clung to the hope that their love could be salvaged, even as the weight of his manipulations bore down on her. Publicly, he played the devoted partner, fueling rumors of a secret marriage, while privately he continued to undermine her. The breaking point came during a Caribbean cruise. Onassis's erratic behavior and public humiliations escalated to physical violence, extinguishing any remnants of respect or affection Maria had clung to. After a particularly heated argument, during which he slapped her, Maria realized the full extent of his destructiveness. His control extended even to forbidding her from leaving the yacht, forcing her to endure his whims and host his guests, a task she performed with growing resentment. By the time the cruise reached Nassau, Maria could take no more. She confided in writer Leo Lerman, describing her decision to leave Onassis as an act of survival. "He's sick, destructive, he brainwashed me. If I had stayed with him, he would have killed me, or I would have killed him." Maria's departure from Onassis marked the end of one of the most tumultuous chapters of her life. Though she escaped his grip, the scars of their relationship lingered, both emotionally and physically. She had endured years of abuse and manipulation, sacrificing her career, her independence, and her self-worth for a love that had ultimately destroyed her. Her departure cleared the way for Jacqueline Kennedy. Watching from afar as the world buzzed about the Kennedy wedding, Maria remained composed, even predicting its eventual downfall, saying, "It is cruel, but they are paying for it, both of them." Privately, though, she battled despair, retreating to Paris and overdosing on sleeping pills. Though she denied it was an attempt to end her life, her letters revealed the depth of her heartbreak. "I feel so lost," she wrote. Torrential rain marked the wedding ceremony of Jackie Kennedy to Onassis on Scorpios. Maria simply commented, "Wait and see." Though she maintained her composure, attending premieres and social events, her heartbreak was undeniable. Her love for Onassis had consumed her, leaving her grappling with a profound sense of loss, not just of love, but of the identity she had built around their relationship. Onassis continued to manipulate her, using promises of reconciliation to keep her tethered to him. He called her on the wedding day, begging her to come help him. She responded with, "You got yourself into this mess, you get yourself out." A month later, he tried to force his way back into Maria's life. Arriving unannounced at her home, he threatened to drive his Rolls-Royce through her gates unless she let him in. Maria, drawing on a reservoir of strength she thought depleted, confronted him. When he climbed into her bed, she threw him out, shouting, "Shame on you!" noting it was the anniversary of John Kennedy's death. "What is over," she declared, though the scars of his betrayal remained. Subsequent offers to return to the stage were declined. Fear of being compared to her past self paralyzed her. "The public always wants more," she confided. "If you give them 100%, they demand 200%. Her reluctance was compounded by a growing dread that her voice, once her most powerful asset, could no longer meet the audience's expectations. Amid her retreat from opera, Maria was offered to star in a film adaptation of Medea. Medea's story of love, betrayal, and vengeance resonated deeply with her own life. "She's a woman, with all the experiences of a woman," Maria reflected. "But everything is bigger sacrifice, bigger hurt." Dressed in primitive robes and surrounded by rugged terrain, Maria found catharsis in embodying Medea's anguish. Pasolini described her as the perfect choice for the role, saying, "She doesn't need to act, her eyes tell the whole story." The physical and emotional demands of the role mirrored Maria's inner struggles, allowing her to channel her heartbreak into her art. Pasolini became one of the few men in her life to value her intellect over her fame, engaging her in deep conversations on art and philosophy. "He worshipped my mind," Maria later said, grateful for the connection. Through the character, Maria reclaimed a piece of herself. Though the film's reception was mixed, it marked a brief but significant moment of artistic redemption. For Maria, the experience was about more than critical acclaim. It was a chance to transform her pain into something meaningful. During filming, Maria faced both physical and emotional challenges. The heat was grueling, her low blood pressure caused fainting spells, and she worked tirelessly despite setbacks, including a costume fire that sparked sensational rumors of life-threatening burns. While her mother and sister feigned concern, Maria dismissed their inquiries as greed disguised as care. Pasolini adored her dedication and immortalized her in poetry and drawings, but his reverence sometimes unnerved her. the raw, divine figure he saw in her mirrored Medea's mythical roots, a woman betrayed and othered in a world she sacrificed everything to join. On screen, Maria conveyed these themes with restraint, often disengaging physically to embody the metaphysical. Onassis, using the alias Mr. Lupoli, occasionally phoned her during production, but she refused his calls. For the first time, Maria felt in control of her own narrative. Her commitment to the film came at a personal cost. A strict diet and cosmetic procedures helped her maintain a striking image on screen, but they also spoke to her insecurities. The lingering close-ups heightened her discomfort. She objected to certain scenes, including one where she sang a Greek lullaby to her children, later killed by Medea, feeling they exposed too much vulnerability. When Medea premiered in January 1970, it divided audiences. Critics appreciated Maria's ethereal presence, but lamented the film's sparse backstory and abstract narrative. At any rate, Maria said with grace, it's the kind of film people will either love or hate. While Medea failed commercially, through the lens, she found a space to channel her pain into art, transforming her personal heartbreak into a timeless portrayal of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience. In January, Maria initiated divorce proceedings from her estranged husband, following Italy's new divorce laws. When asked if she would marry Aristotle Onassis, whose rumored divorce was also making headlines, she deftly deflected, maintaining a carefully guarded exterior. For years, her identity had been tethered to her roles as wife, lover, and global icon. Now she began shedding those layers, growing her hair long, wearing trousers, and confidently embracing a more authentic version of herself. Now I'm really free, she told reporters. Alone, but I always have been then as now. Her independence extended to her personal life, resisting Onassis's attempts to rekindle their relationship. Referring to his romantic entanglements with Jackie and Lee, she dismissed him with scorn. Let him have his two courtesans. Only she used a much more emphatic term for the women. I understand only one policy, freedom, she declared. I paid for it. Now I don't want to lose it. In the same year, Maria embarked on a new chapter as a teacher at the Juilliard School. Juilliard carefully selected 25 students, including future luminary Barbara Hendricks. Initially, skepticism about Maria's reliability deterred ticket sales, but word of her magnetic presence quickly spread, turning her classes into sold-out events. Despite moments of brilliance, Maria's self-doubt lingered. Privately, she confessed feeling unable to impart the essence of her artistry. It's something you're born with, and I was unable to give it. I failed, she lamented. Personal rumors and professional rivalries further complicated her tenure. Though she ended her final class with heartfelt gratitude, she declined to renew her contract, considering the experience unfulfilling. In the 1950s, whispers of a romance between Maria Callas and Giuseppe Di Stefano lingered in the shadows of the opera stages they illuminated together. Their onstage chemistry captivated audiences, making fiction feel like reality. It was love at first sight, he admitted years later. But Maria, ever the professional, kept their connection within the confines of performance, refusing to blur the line between art and life. 2 decades later, their lives converged again, this time in the shadow of personal turmoil. Maria's loneliness and Di Stefano's anguish over his daughter's illness drew them together, weaving an affair out of shared sorrow. It's hard for them. What a pity, Maria said of his family, her words heavy with the weight of her own wounds. Yet, as with all her loves, it was steeped in unattainability, echoing her perpetual yearning for connection. Back in Paris, Maria retreated into isolation. Offers that could have reignited her career, like becoming the Metropolitan Opera's artistic director, were declined. She doubted herself, doubted her voice. Recording duets with Di Stefano, she confessed the sessions made a return to the stage less terrifying, though her dissatisfaction with her waning abilities was ever present. Meanwhile, the death of her estranged father brought unresolved grief to the surface. Once idolized, George Callas had become a figure of shame, soliciting money from her friends and tarnishing her name. Maria refused to attend his funeral, mourning in private the loss of both the father she loved and the father who betrayed her. In January 1973, Aristotle Onassis re-entered her life, ravaged by grief after his son's tragic death in a plane crash. "They would rather see me suffer than kill me," he murmured, paranoid and guilt-ridden. Maria offered what comfort she could, framing the loss as cruel fate, yet she recognized his true reason for seeking her out: solace, not love. She was his sanctuary, though she had none of her own. March offered fleeting warmth as Maria joined Di Stefano at Capopino, where Italian tabloids proclaimed her mad desire to live. But beneath her smiles lay a profound frustration with the betrayal of age. Surviving on lettuce and honey, she lamented, "Why can't the doctors find a pill that does no harm but makes you consume all you eat?" The mirror offered no reprieve. Beauty, once her armor, was now a fading illusion. Later that year, Maria embarked on a tour, her swan song to the world. Each performance was a tightrope act, her voice a flickering flame against the shadows of her former greatness. In Hamburg, audiences welcomed her warmly. In London, critics were merciless. "They love what I was, not what I am," she said on her 50th birthday. Yet amidst the chaos, an unexpected reunion with Renata Tebaldi offered a rare moment of peace. Once cast as bitter rivals by the press, the two sopranos now sat together, not as adversaries, but as women who had endured the price of greatness. They reminisced about the highs and lows of their careers, finding solace in shared understanding. For Maria, it was a poignant reminder that even amid the wreckage of fame, connection was still possible. By the time the tour reached Sapporo, Maria was a shadow of herself. "Well, tomorrow's the last one," she said with quiet resignation. Her final performance was a testament to her courage, though her voice faltered under the weight of illness and despair. As the curtain fell, so too did the legend of Callas. "Music is the only thing I have in my life," she had once confessed, but even that could not sustain her. The Callas myth, forged in fire, had consumed the woman behind it. In Paris, Maria filled her lonely days with routines that seemed more like rituals, as though trying to piece together a life that had unraveled. She called Onassis daily, clinging to their shared history, even as the conversation revolved around a future she knew would never come. Her affair with Di Stefano had grown cold, but her emotions wavered. One day, she longed for his presence. The next, she steeled herself against his refusal to leave his wife. She presented a facade of composure to the world, but the strain was evident. When news reached her that Onassis was gravely ill, the mask began to crack. His decline was as rapid as it was devastating. Hospitalized and reliant on a ventilator, he was a shadow of the man she had known. His marriage with Jackie Kennedy had been a disaster. Maria, slipping through a side door to visit him, found him fading, frail, and entangled in the machinery keeping him alive. He managed to whisper, "I loved you, not always well, but as much and as best as I was capable of." When he died on March 15, 1975, Maria met the news with quiet finality. "It's over," she sighed. In her mind, she absolved him of his many betrayals, holding on to an idealized version of their connection, as though rewriting the heartbreak into something bearable. But peace eluded her. She drifted through Paris, writing letters filled with fantasies of what might have been and what could never be. She spoke of finding someone new, someone perfect, though she dismissed modern men as superficial and presumptuous. Her voice, once her refuge, had become a source of despair. "I'm stopping singing. I'm fed up with the whole business," she declared, though the admission seemed more resignation than resolve. Her health, long dismissed by doctors as neurosis, began to fail her. Diagnosed with dermatomyositis, an autoimmune disease that left her in constant pain, Maria was prescribed prednisone. The medication caused weight gain, a change she could not bear. She stopped taking it, exacerbating her symptoms. Insomnia gripped her nights, and during the day she turned to Mandrax, a sedative supplied by her sister and even her estranged mother. The pills offered fleeting escape, but they hastened her decline. "I've lost everything," she confided. "My voice is gone. I don't have a man, I don't have a child." Maria's isolation deepened. Vaso de Vezzi, a pianist who had ingratiated herself into Maria's life, became both companion and manipulator. Vaso shielded Maria from the outside world, intercepting calls and turning away friends who sought to visit her. She encouraged Maria to sing, knowing full well the pain it caused when her once glorious voice faltered. These sessions, inevitably ending in tears, chipped away at Maria's fragile self-esteem. In moments of rare clarity, Maria reflected on the life she had lived. I am a person without identity, she wrote. I was born of Greek parents, yet I have never felt absolutely Greek. I was born in America, yet I am not an American. I lived the most crucial period of my career in Italy. I married an Italian, but of course I am not an Italian. I now live permanently in Paris, but this doesn't mean I feel French. What the hell am I after all? What am I? I am alone, always alone. Her days became a monotonous cycle of television, ice cream, and mandrakes. The pills rattled ominously beside her as she drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. In her dreams, Onassis returned, their unresolved relationship haunting her like an unfinished aria. I want to help him, but I can't, she confided, as though trying to rewrite their story in her mind. On a brief holiday to Spain, the paparazzi pursued her, trying to get a picture of her in her bikini. Maria, self-conscious about her body, ran back to her hotel room and spent the rest of the holiday watching TV. Back in Paris, she wrote to her godfather with fleeting hope. Maybe next year will be more exciting. But her words carried the weight of resignation. On September 16, 1977, Maria Callas's life ended as quietly as it had burned so brightly. Her death marked the final act of a life that had been as dramatic as any opera she had performed. Maria Callas, who once poured her soul into every note, left this world in quiet contrast to the grandeur she had so often embodied. Her funeral was understated, attended by those who truly knew and loved her, though the modesty of the ceremony seemed a far cry from the life she had lived. She was cremated at Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, her urn placed among countless other legends. But even in death, her story remained extraordinary. In a final twist as operatic as her life, even death could not release Maria Callas from the grip of destiny. Her ashes, stolen from their sacred repose, seemed to echo the world's unwillingness to let her go. But when at last they were recovered, her ultimate wish was fulfilled, to be scattered in the Aegean Sea, the waters of her ancestors, shimmering with myth and memory. There, beneath the forgiving golden light of the sun, her essence met the tides. The waves carried her away, folding her into their eternal rhythm, as though the sea itself sang her farewell. Maria, who had belonged everywhere and nowhere, found her sanctuary at last in the boundless embrace of the waters that birthed gods and heroes. Her voice, once a tempest that shattered silence and stirred the soul, dissolved into the ceaseless symphony of the waves. When her ashes met the sea, it was as if the tides were reclaiming one of their own. She was not merely an artist, but a siren of myth, her song transcending life and death. Now, in the azure depths of legend, she sings forever, a siren's call to all who dare to dream, to defy, and to reach beyond the ordinary for the extraordinary. I hope you enjoyed this week's story on Maria Callas. Her life was as complex and passionate as her music, and there's always more to explore. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your opinions and ideas mean so much to me and help guide this channel. Every like, share, and subscription helps bring these remarkable stories to more people. With over 70 women's biographies now available, there's a treasure trove of history waiting to be discovered. Let me know your favorite stories so far, and tell me who you'd love to see featured next. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible patrons: Velocity Girl, ZenLife68, Jillian Barker, Junie Moon, Philip Gallegos, Kingsley Clark, Copham Chung, Harry Thurston, Karen Craig, Second Soprano 150, Michelle Lynn Neal, Bavia Andrea, Tracy Walsh, Elizabeth, CTS Bathory, America Marie, Joy McGuire, Amber Perry, Amanda Lynn, Snowball, The Inappropriate Heifer, Kendra McNally, Marianne Nelson, and Deborah Shepard. Your support breathes life into this project and makes these stories possible. Congratulations to this week's trivia winner, Lisa Craig 4585. Well done. Want to be next week's winner? Stay tuned and join the fun. To everyone who watched to the end, thank you for being part of this journey. Stay curious, keep exploring history, and I'll see you next week for another extraordinary story. And as always, thanks for watching.